showing you my full gouache painting process, including the planning and where I also used digital art for this very traditional piece. This video was sponsored by Clip Studio Paint, and I'm so happy that they emailed me for this because for a long time now I've been wanting to venture deeper into the world of digital art, and for today I'm gonna show you how I use it for my mostly traditional process. Some of these steps might be a little more surprising than others, but I'm hoping it will still help you guys more in your painting process. So the very first thing I use digital art for is for doing my line work. And you guys probably already know that I don't usually do this. I don't really usually clean up my line work a lot, but doing your sketches digitally, it makes just the process a lot more convenient and less messy. I think the best thing about sketching your art digitally is that undo and redo button. It's just, it gets very addicting sometimes, and it really sped up the process, especially for me whose sketches aren't always the cleanest, and especially when you're planning on working on watercolor paper. The texture is very delicate and you never want to damage it before you even start painting, and that could happen when you do a lot of erasures. And also, especially with watercolors, you're working with a medium that's very transparent, and so all your messy line work could still show up underneath. So you might want to do your sketches beforehand and then transfer it over onto your watercolor paper, which is what I'm doing right now. There's a lot of things that surprised me when I was doing this whole sketch on Clip Studio Paint. I don't know why, but I didn't expect those little things like double tap function on the pencil to toggle from your pencils to your erasers. I think this was a nice surprise, and I don't know why I didn't expect that. I probably should have. Just this whole thing was not as stressful as my other sketches, and also I could work out the composition. Even though it's just I'm only drawing one person, I can work out his pose better without messing up the paper that I'm gonna be eventually painting on. And so the next part of my planning stage is to do the thumbnailing also digitally. So what I did was just pasted the same line work in 4 times in the canvas, so I can see which color combinations would work best for the painting that I had in mind. And this stage is so important for this piece that I want to go as smoothly as possible. You guys know that usually when I'm painting I have a very different approach. I just usually go by feel, and most of the time I regret doing that. So for this one, and especially for this one, I want to plan out everything before I do the actual painting, and not only the composition at first, but also the lighting and the colors that I'm going to be using, especially because I want the lighting to be the main focus of this piece. And also I really just want to plan my colors out in advance. I don't want to mess it up, because I'm going to be working with traditional gouache, which is something that you can't glaze over with different colors. It's not like watercolors. Once you're working with traditional gouache on a thicker consistency, it's very hard to go over that with a looser paint, and so it's basically impossible to glaze with gouache. And so you really want to plan out all of your colors in advance, and that's why I'm doing this. By the way, my favorite brush for this one is the gouache. Actually, the gouache brush that they had, wasn't expecting it. I was just really going with the names of the brushes that they had by default that came with the program. So while I was sketching, I was just working with the default brushes for sketching, and then for painting I just did the traditional gouache brush, and I really loved how that one works. And I also found that I enjoyed the process of thumbnailing so much, and I had to remind myself to take a step back and remember that this is just the planning stage, and it's okay not to go overboard on this one, just because I was just enjoying this whole thing, maybe a little too much. Also, I want to talk about something that I was really surprised about with the Clip Studio Paint, is that I was surprised how beginner friendly it actually became. So even before they emailed me about wanting to collaborate, I was already thinking of getting a more advanced drawing program on my iPad and not just Procreate. And even though I do love Procreate, there are some features that I think are missing. So when they emailed me, I was already planning on taking classes because I know this was a skill that I wanted to pursue and to polish. And I actually did watch a few classes on Skillshare, but when it came down to it, all I really needed to watch was one video, and I will be linking it in the description, but it was a tutorial on how to customize your workspace to make it work for you, and that's what I did. So at this point in my digital art journey, that's really all I needed to know. So the first thing I did was take out a lot of the stuff that I'm not gonna be using, like the materials and like just all the other features, and just leave them out of my whole workspace so it's not as intimidating for someone who mostly works traditionally. And that already made the transition work easier for me. But then I also dedicated a whole panel for the things that I'm gonna constantly be using, like adjusting my brush size and my color wheel and also my layers. I just have that one whole panel for my left hand side, so it's easier for me because on Procreate they also had that slider for the brush size, and I think it was for opacity. So I really thought I was gonna miss that, but now I have that and also more, because I really like this feature of having the color wheel right on my left hand side, because especially for this stage I'm going to be using it a lot. So that came in really handy and I was really surprised by that. And so just all those little steps was really helpful. I think it was probably the most helpful thing when I was first starting out. It just made this workspace much less overwhelming for someone like me. And by the way, this third one I think is really dangerous because I really liked how this third one turned out, but then the colors were just so out of my comfort zone that I ended up going with something like a combination of all three. So now I'm done with my planning stage and it's time to actually start my painting. So because I did the coloring on a completely different layer from my line works, I went ahead and printed out just the line work, and now I'm transferring it onto my watercolor paper. And I'm doing that by smearing my soft pastels at the back of the paper that I printed on and just really drawing over the line work that I did digitally. And I recommend really using a color that wasn't the color of your printed line work, just so it's easier for you to keep track of the parts that you've already drawn on, which is something that happened to me before. You can kind of forget which parts you've already done and traced on, so something like this might help when you're doing this. And now, after I've selected and color matched from my iPad the colors that I'm gonna need for this piece, I'm just starting the whole painting now with just gouache. I always find that the most daunting part about painting with gouache is this initial part when you're just starting out. So when you're filling in these large areas, it can be very hard to do with a thicker medium. And what I'm just doing is making it more loose with water, but that also sacrifices a lot of its opacity. So I also just have to deal with the streakiness. I think it would have gone better with watercolors, just this initial stage. But then I also had to get very dark values initially, and with watercolors it's really hard to get those dark colors from the very start, and so I just went with the gouache still. I don't usually do thumbnails, so it was surprising how smoothly this whole painting process went, but just mentally, just because most of the time when I'm painting, I'm also thinking on the fly and changing things as I go. But for this one, everything kind of just went as planned, and so it was only a matter of execution. But it really took out a lot of the mental burden that comes with when you're working with gouache, especially for me. It just took out a lot of the stress that comes with working with a medium that's as temperamental as gouache. And so really the only problem I had was translating everything that I had planned digitally into a physical painting. And so at one point it got really daunting for me, and because of how easy it was to paint digitally, I ended up underestimating these initial stages. I think I psyched myself out when it came down to the blending, and especially on the face. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. And so what I did was I took a picture of my painting on the stage that it is right now and imported it onto Clip Studio Paint. And because my phone kind of altered the colors a little, it looks a lot different from the actual painting. I edited the image to look as close to the painting I had as possible. And this was one of the features with Procreate that I was missing, is there weren't a lot of options for tonal correction. So as much as I love Procreate, that was one of the things that I really wanted. And it's also one of the reasons why I was looking for a different alternative to Procreate. And so just what I'm doing right now is I'm just looking at how it stands with the other thumbnails to see if I've veered off too much from the original plan, and if it is, to see what I can do to nudge it closer to the thumbnail that I decided on. And another thing, because it was his face that was really giving me a hard time, what I'm doing is I'm just fixing it digitally first, because it's easier to backtrack that way. If I make a mistake, I can just go ahead and erase that part. Whereas with gouache, it's very hard to go over areas that you want to change. And so doing it this way first and properly planning out where I need to fix things, I think will really help me when I go to do them on my actual painting, which is more delicate. And so now that I have that planned and with everything mapped out on Clip Studio first, going back to my original painting was just a breeze again. And one thing that I did while I was using that for reference is to take the photo that I was using and lower the opacity so I can really see where I need to work on first before doing that, and that was great. One thing that I did that wasn't planned was doing the sea animals on his lamp. And even though I was liking how it was turning out, it kind of took attention away from the piece as a whole. And so even though I liked how it was going, when I was looking at my digital painting again, I'd prefer that version more without it. And so I just ended up painting over the whole design that I did early on. So that way the painting remains just about the lighting and the boy, which is my son, by the way. And because I've always been so intrigued by this kind of lighting where the light is coming from below, I always thought it would make the subject look more sinister, and I wanted to do something with the same kind of lighting but have it look more warm and happy, and I think I kind of achieved that, so that was great. And so in conclusion, just having all of those things planned in advance really helped make this painting, because I could really see myself just struggling with this lighting so much, just because it's not what I'm used to. I'm not used to light hitting the face this way. So really having things planned in advance before I even started painting really took out a lot of the mental burden that usually comes with something that's new for me like this. And I could really see myself doing this again. Well, not for all of my projects, but certainly for all of my bigger projects like this one, because then I could focus more on my actual painting and not about planning as I'm going along. And that is it for the whole video. Thank you guys for watching. Watch out for my next one. I will be trying out acrylic gouache, and I really liked it, so I hope you join me on that one too. Thank you for staying till the end, and I will be seeing you again soon.